Hello and welcome to the video, and today it's time to showcase you some Dino-Rabbit gameplay in Firewater format. I already mentioned that someone played Dino-Rabbit in one of the previous tournaments, and I think this deck choice is absolutely crazy because when we look at the ban list, we can see Rescue Rabbit in the limited section. It got limited in September 2013, so went from 2 to 1, and I honestly think with one Rescue Rabbit this deck should be completely unplayable. But maybe the Dino-Rabbit player can prove us wrong in this replay. So let's check out this replay. Here we see Nuke against yugioh. And by the way, in the end I might showcase the deck list, so stay until the end if you want to see the deck list from the Dino-Rabbit player. So here we see Murmillo, Forbidden Lands, Torrential, Double MST and Cabasouls. Okay, and here we see Pot of Duality, Insect Imitation, Card Cardi, MST and Instant Fusion. So it looks like Inzektor, and here we have Murmillo, a great starter. So probably grabbing the bottomless trap hole. Yeah, grabbing the bottomless trap hole. But Inzektor has some cards that could be under bottomless trap hole. For example, the Ladybug and also the Dragonfly. They are smaller than 1500, but yugioh has to open them. So set 5 pass, pretty strong start. I honestly think this is one of the best possible turn 1 setups for a deck like Dino-Rabbit, unless you have something like Rabbit into Lagia plus 5 back row. Okay, but here we see Pot of Duality into Armageddonite. So putting the others back, and then normal summon Card Cardi. MST in response to the Card Cardi effect. So now yugioh loses the back row, and yeah, has still to enter the end phase because of the Card Cardi effect. And now Nuke can attack into an open board. So we normal summon the yugioh, which is pretty strong against the deck. Yeah, we saw Pot of Duality, and yugioh might be on multiple dualities, and Thunder King yugioh can shut down Pot of Duality completely. And then we see Monk, but first of all we see normal summon Armageddonite. So Armageddonite dumping the Hornet and then Instant Fusion. Okay, now we are going to see Instant Fusion in action, because in the past someone asked me what Inzektor is doing with the Instant Fusion, and now here we have the answer. So going into Camion Wizard, which is smaller than 1500, which means it cannot fall into bottomless trap hole, so it can make Inzektor Knight into the opponent's board. But the opponent has Thunder King yugioh, so we are probably not going to make Inzektor Knight here. Maybe something else to bait out the yugioh, like the Silent Honor Arc. Yeah, that works. And then set to pass. Now attacking with the Murm, then normal summon Cabasouls, and then making their own defensive Silent Honor Arc. And if the opponent has removal that destroys cards, we can just detach Xyz material from Silent Honor Arc instead. Also works with a Dark Hole in the hand that we just decide to set as a bluff. Sure. And then double MST, trading with 2 back row. Holy shit, we hit the bottomless trap hole, and he also decides to not use Torrential on the summon. Okay, and now Inzektor might be still in the game. So we can equip the Ladybug and then Hornet, pop one of those back rows. What do we hit? We hit the Torrential, which is huge for Inzektor. Wow, and now we can go Insect Imitation into Dragonfly, and now Inzektor turned the game completely around. Wow, what an amazing comeback. Yeah, now Dragonfly, and now Dino-Rabbit gets comboed. So summoning the Centipede, and then popping the Dark Hole, then we search the Caliber, probably just follow up, but he has another Instant Fusion. Wait, just making sure he didn't use 2 Instant Fusion in the same turn. Yeah, I think the Silent Honor Arc was used in the last turn. Yeah, so works out perfectly fine here. We make the Flame Ghost, okay. And the Leviathan. And now we have 2 bodies that are bigger than Silent Honor Arc. And Nuke is suddenly left with nothing. Wow, that was a crazy turn from the Inzektor player. We comboed through 3 back row, popped the entire back row of the opponent, and now we establish 2 bodies that are bigger than the Silent Honor Arc. So Nuke has to detach, and then we top deck Mirror Force, which would be strong as a top deck, but unfortunately the opponent has already the Hornet in rotation, and if we set Mirror Force, the opponent is just going to pop the Mirror Force. Yeah, so no point of setting it. And then we get Dragonfly back, and it just OTK. So Dino-Rabbit loses the game 1, and then game 2 we see Sabersaurus, Cabosaurus, Trapjack, Strapple, Nightmare, Torrential, Compulse, and MST. Here we have Dark-Hole, Foolish, Instant, Waboko, and Pot of Duality. So set for pass. Okay. So it feels like a Fire Fist deck, but the engine is much weaker because a vanilla monster is obviously putting less pressure on the board compared to Tanky or Bear. Okay, Yugioh moment starting with the Duality again into Armageddonite again. Then we dump Hornet again and then Instant Fusion. Going for the Camion Wizard again. And now we should be -1 for Excitonite. But he decides to go for Lavalval Chain, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, was there a reason to not go for Excitonite immediately? Yeah, I honestly would go for Excitonite here, wipe the entire back row, put the opponent on better have something good, and if the opponent doesn't have something good, then yeah, opponent is just cooked. And we have lots of turns to potentially top deck an Inzektor monster, which could equip the Hornet. But here he went for a different approach, trying to set up combo with the Dragonfly to equip the Hornet in the next turn by stacking Dragonfly on top. I think I can respect this play. Yeah, then Compulse on Summon, and we have the Forbidden Lands. Also, Forbidden Lands works perfectly with Excitonite. Yeah, but maybe he had a read that one of those sets might be Blackhorn of Heaven. And if that was his read, then I think going for the Lavalval Chain instead of Excitonite could make a little bit more sense. Yeah, I kind of get it why he went for Lavalval Chain over Excitonite. Hoping that his play goes through. But the problem is, if the opponent has anything that could be a response to normal summon Dragonfly, then the Inzektor player is cooked. And now he has to hope that Nuki isn't top decking anything that could stop a normal summon Dragonfly. So stacking the Dragonfly, set to pass, and then we have the Waboko, which can not only protect the Lavalval Chain, but also the Dragonfly. And then here we make Cabosaurus and Sabersaurus. So 2 dinosaurs, and you know what this means. We can make an Evolzer in the main phase too. But first of all, battle phase is taking over Lavalval Chain before we might play into a potential Blackhorn of Heaven. And then Dolka, okay. Yeah, and now this one can stop the Dragonfly completely. And even with Waboko, this one can use the effect twice, and the opponent doesn't have a second Waboko to keep the Dragonfly on the board. But he has a Dark Hole, and Nuki doesn't have anything to stop the Dark Hole. But we have Torrential, which could stop the Dragonfly. And then both players end up in the top deck mode. Yeah. So Torrential, and now let's see who can top deck better. Nuki top decked Ryo, which is obviously huge in such simplified game sets, because 1900 is such a difficult number to get over. Also, it shuts down the top deck of Yugioh moment in Duality. Yeah, Ryo was such a nasty top deck here, and then he top deck Macro. Bruh. Yeah, and with the Macro, it should be game. Yeah. Okay. I'm also curious, doesn't play Yugioh any Call of the Haunted? I might check his decklist later, but not playing Call of the Haunted or any extended reboot from the graveyard seems kinda crazy in my opinion, because this deck, as we saw in this replay, seems to rely pretty hard on a normal summon, and if the normal summon doesn't go through, then Instant Fusion is also kinda useless, because then we can't do anything with one single Instant Fusion, so we need extenders that special summon from the graveyard, like Call of the Haunted. But here we have Maxi, Dino-Rabbit, Bottomless Trap Hole, 7 Twists, and Cabosaurus. So 3 games, and in the third game we finally see the Rescue Rabbit, which makes also perfectly sense mathematically, because this card is limited, so you are not supposed to see that card very often. But maybe Nuki has some workarounds in the decklist that we haven't seen yet. So we start with Duality, and then Waboko, Card KD. Also, it's kind of funny that Yugioh drew Card KD in 3 out of 3 games. Yeah. But now we have Rescue Rabbit. We decide to attack first. And then main phase 2. Make Dolka. Yeah, and Nuki may have recognized that Yugioh doesn't have any extenders to special summon from the graveyard. So Dolka seems stronger than luckier here. Yeah, so Pot of Duality, Excavating MST. Okay. Centipede gets hit with Bottomless Trap Hole. Yeah, and this is what I mean. Here we see the lack of extenders in Inzektor deck. We have Dragonfly and Gigamantis, but that's it. There aren't any pushes except with those two cards. So normal summon Sabersaurus, attack. And then on the attack declaration, we see MST on the back row of the opponent. Holy shit! That was such a good play. I think Gayoma must have studied decklist from Nuki in the previous replays and saw that he's on 7 tools in main deck. And now he is playing around the 7 tools in the main deck or side deck by using MST first before the 7 tools has the opportunity to negate the Waboku from the opponent. That is such a good play from Gayoma Man. Holy shit. And now Waboku, the opponent, doesn't have 7 tools to negate it. And we are able to survive. And now we have Dragonfly Gigamantis. He also decides to not start with the Allure, trying to top deck a potential Dark Hole. I think in this game state you have to take some risks and try to top deck into Dark Hole, otherwise he is not going to break through with this setup. I could be wrong too, but we have to consider that from Gayoma Man's perspective, Nuki has 3 unknown cards, and any of those could be a hand trap. Maybe Gayoma Man hasn't seen the Effect Veiler yet, but we saw in the previous game that Nuki top decked Maxi and Effect Veiler after he already top decked Ryo, so there are definitely some hand traps in this list that we might want to respect as an Inzektor player. But it seems like Gayoma Man wants to play the safest line available, and this could be the safest line. So Gigamantis forcing out the first negate, and then... What? That didn't work out that well for him. Yeah, I think he had to play extremely risky by going for the Allure of Darkness, trying to top deck something like Forbidden Lands, Waboku, or Dark Hole. Yeah, that didn't work out for him. Okay, now we go for it, and we miss. Yeah, that can happen too in Inzektor if you don't have enough Dark Monsters. Okay, so we have to discard our entire hand, and now it seems like he still tries to go for the Instant Fusion, but then we get hit with the Maxi, and now it's a losing game state. Yeah, okay, Acid Golem, he accidentally summoned the level 4, but he also has the level 3 fusion in X-Ray, so we are obviously able to fix this game state. And then making Acid Golem with those, attacking over the Dolka. But now the problem is, now Gayoma Man is on a timer, because he has to top deck something like Phoenix Chain or Compulse to get rid of his own Acid Golem. Otherwise, Acid Golem is going to burn him down.
I will burn this planet down.
And now we make Solemn Warning on the Dolka. Okay, I can respect that play, but it also advances his clock 1 turn further. Because now he needs to top deck and out against his own Acid Golem much fast. Otherwise, this card is going to burn him down. So Forbidden Lands, okay. Now in the next turn he has to detach, can no longer attack, and then in the stepper phase after that it's game over with the Acid Golem. He top decked Compulse, but Nuki has the Forbidden Lands. Holy shit. That was crazy. Okay, that match was pretty interesting. So first of all, I'm really positively surprised that Gayoma Man was able to break through the Dino-Rabbit board game 1 and combo through 3 back row. I did not expect that to happen. Game 2, he didn't draw enough Inzektor monsters to combo. I guess it can happen. And game 3, Acid Golem burning himself down. That was completely unexpected. The Evolzars definitely came in handy and did some serious work in this match. But I don't know, this doesn't seem good enough when you compare this deck with all of the other decks in the format. Okay, but that's it for the match. And now I will show you the deck list of the Dino-Rabbit player and also the Inzektor player, and you may draw your own conclusions from that, and let me know your opinion in the comment section. Yeah, feel free to like, comment and subscribe, and let me know your opinions on those decks in the comment section. And here we see the Dino-Rabbit deck, playing with 6 vanillas and not 3, so the game plan is obviously trying to resolve Rabbit twice, which we can do with the Tour Guide into Levia after we already went through 1 Rabbit. and he's also playing the Gold Sark, which can banish the rabbit from the deck. And then we have Tour Guide, which by the way is at 3 in this format, and it got semi-limited in previous retro formats, for example Windup and Meadowlands, but now we have Tour Guide back at 3. Unfortunately, we had to replace the Sangan with Night Assailant, because it's probably the best level 3 Fiend monster as a target for Tour Guide, except for other copies of Tour Guide itself. Yeah, we also want to resolve Tour Guide twice in the game, and we need to have a 4th level 3 Dark monster that we can summon with Tour Guide. Therefore we have to play the Night Assailant. And then we can make the Levia, summon the Rabbit back, and then make the Dinos and make the Evolvers. Also in this format, Tour Guide actually got a buff, because we have cards like Ghost Trick Alucard, which is an oppressive rank 3 that can pop the yugioh armor or the background from the opponent depending on what you want to pop. But as you saw in my previous videos, Tour Guide with the rank 3 toolbox that we have in this format, especially with Alucard, is extremely solid in this format and might be extremely underestimated in the majority of decks, except for the yugioh deck from Icarus, who played Tour Guide in yugioh specifically for the mirror match, because the line Tour Guide into Alucard to pop the armor from the opponent in the mirror is just so nice. Yeah, and then we also could make Leviathan to attack over the Gear Giant X from the opponent, and this does beat yugioh in simplified game sets, because the opponent needs to commit 2 level 4s to go into a Silent or an Arc to out the Leviathan Dragon. So Tour Guide having the option to become a back row pop or a 2500 beta or just a pop on any card from the opponent is really nice. So that's the first thing to notice. The other things to notice would be the 1 Murmileo as a replacement for Rescue Rabbit, because this card is a really strong turn 1 normal summon, but we have to play a second trap hole except the bottomless trap hole in the main deck, because if we draw the bottomless trap hole first and then top deck Murmileo, this card doesn't do anything. But it's one of the strongest generic normal summons that you can play in any deck in this format where you want to have additional normal summons. We could also cut Murmileo from the main deck and focus more on the Mistake in the main deck, because this deck can abuse Mistake really hard. It doesn't have any card that add cards from the main deck to the hand except for Pot of Duality. But then I'm curious why we decided to play only 2 Pot of Duality with 1 Rescue Rabbit. I think if we play 3 Pot of Duality, we have a better chance to dig into Rescue Rabbit. On the other hand, he decides to play 3 7 tools of the Bandit. I guess it has something to do with the Gaiba, because we do not want to attack with our Gaiba into Deep Prison or Mirror Force from the opponent. So 3 7 tools to prevent exactly that. Also, it can deal with Black Horn of Heaven from the opponent. But the other thing that really catches my eye is that he is not playing Finished Chain. It seems like Nuki doesn't like Finished Chain at all, but I think this card is really solid in almost any Firewater deck. Instead, he's playing 2 Effect Veiler and 1 Black Horn of Heaven to deal with the opponent's Exciter Knight. But also, if we are able to establish a Dolka on the board, then we might not need Finished Chain anymore. Instead, the Battle Traps could be more helpful, because the opponent is obviously trying to make an expertise that is bigger than the Dolka, or something that is tied with Dolka, for example Gear Giant X, and then the opponent has to attack into the Dolka and has to attack into double Deep Prison and double Mirror Force. Yeah, I guess this back row lineup could work for Dino-Rabbit specifically. And side deck, nothing extraordinary, but in general really interesting approach with not playing Finished Chain, instead focusing on Dolka plus Battle Traps, Effect Veiler and Blackhorn, and the Red Extrapole Nightmare to deal with Exciter Knight, and triple 7 tools of the Bandit. I've never seen 3 MST, 3 Forbidden Lands, and 3 7 tools of the Bandit in any Firewater main deck. So let me know your opinions on this deck in the comment section. And now let's take a quick look at the Inzektor deck list. Here we see 1 Armageddon Knight together with the Monk. Yeah, I think that's one of the more recent innovations in Inzektor, because when you have Monk plus any spell, you can make Armageddon Knight, this one can Foolish the Hornet, and then we can use the Valva Chain to stack the Dragonfly, and then we have ODK in the next turn with 1 Extender. And there are many cards that could work as Extender, for example the Gigamantis or MST, probably also Insect Imitation. Yeah, so tons of different ODK lines if we open Monk plus spell plus any Extender. And Monk can also summon Monster Floodgates, for example Ryo post side, if we play against a bad matchup, for example Spellbook, which searches a lot. Yeah, and then the trap lineup is only Compulse, Warning and triple Waboku. Okay, that is really extraordinary, because I did not expect a decklist without the Call of the Haunted at all, but we have seen those decklists from Goyomaman in other formats, for example Critter format, He's also playing only 5 traps, so it seems like he's a huge fan of building his decks as hyper offense as possible. I'm not sure if hyper offense Inzektor is the best approach for this deck in this format. I honestly think we should play more Call of the Hornet instead of other extenders, for example the Insect Imitation or Instant Fusion. Also Call has the advantage that we can chain it to a DD Crow from the opponent targeting the Hornet in our graveyard, so we don't have to make Levier plays just to get the banished Hornet back into rotation. Does this deck need Call of the Haunted? Would it be better with Call of the Haunted? Or should we rather play more draw/consistency cards like Triple Upstart, Double Duality and the Allure of Darkness? Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope you really enjoyed it. See you in the next video. Have a nice day. Bye!